is for most of their day navigating a world that was not meant for or created for autistic children or autistic adults. By that, I mean a fast paced world, a world where social norms are in fact considered norms that everyone should know, even though that's not necessary, in my opinion.
Welcome to the Attuned Spectrum podcast. I'm Chantal Hewitt, an ADHD mum, experienced educator, and autism support coach who understands your path because I also walk it daily. This is your space for real conversations that empower your autistic child, yourself, and your family to thrive. Here, we respect neurodiversity, cheer on advocacy, and leave judgment at the door. Join me inside this week's episode.
Welcome back to the Attuned Spectrum podcast. I'm Chantal, your host. If you are back for episode 2, thank you. I'm assuming that means that episode 1 may have resonated with you and that connection and relationship approaches for supporting your autistic child and your family dynamics, they matter to you, which is great, or you're wanting to learn more about them. So if you're diving into this episode, we will be talking about transitions. I will be talking about 3 connection first steps that transform your child's transitions. Those 3 are: understand before you optimize the transition. Number 2 is create what I call safety bridges, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And number 3 is always follow your child's lead. I do just want to start by saying I know that you're tired, and I know that transitions are really tricky. And you've probably tried everything, and some things might work and some things might not work. But what it is it's about understanding exactly what's happening from your child's perspective so that you can work with your child to support their transitions. So we need to let go of this want to control. We have to really understand what your child is going through, and we won't get it right the first time, all the time. There's trial and error, there's communication differences, there's social differences that come into play, or emotional regulation differences. So there's a lot there. But transitions are one of the biggest struggles in the parents and families that I work with, and how they support their autistic child through transitions. What do I mean when I say that we're looking at transitions? So especially if you're new to this space or this language, a transition is from A to B. So that is essentially what we're talking about, is a transition from your child has woken up to going to the toilet, a transition from getting dressed to getting their shoes on, transition from getting those shoes on to walking out the door. So it's all those little things that as parents or adults we do all the time. If you're neurodivergent yourself, you might actually really struggle, as I do, with executive functioning tasks. So that planning, that execution, that actually moving from point A to point B to point C in more of a natural flow. So my natural flow is more of a jagged and then jumping step back and coming forward. And actually, once I realized that, it helped me understand my own child and what they go through when we go through transitions, because transitions are actually really hard for me as well. So I did just want to make that point of acknowledging that while transitions are very hard for children, we also need to take a step back and realize if we struggle as parents with transitions, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical, we can still struggle with those transitions. But understanding that neurodivergent people, specifically autistic and ADHD adults and children, they really struggle with transitions. So again, that moving from point A to point B. So that's what this is about. I want to give you a little picture to think of what struggling in a transition or transitional moment would look like for your autistic child. So in a neurotypical brain, if you think of a transition as clicking the button on a TV remote, so just changing the channel, that is a quick switch. It's a boop, done, and then you're there. In an autistic brain, a transition can actually feel like moving to a different country. You have to consider that you're going from point A, which could be a sensory environment that they're very happy within or that is supportive of them, to then all of a sudden going out into a different temperature if you're going outside, to a new place, not knowing what to expect. trying to make sense of different social rules that they could be internalizing or masking that are really hard for them. That is a different story about masking, but we don't want them to be masking those things. So once we are aware of the struggles that they face with transitions, we can then adjust the environments to support them through those transitions. We don't want them to feel like they're moving to a different country. We want them to feel like it can be as fluid as possible. Please also know that what's fluid and maybe with a bit more ease for one autistic child might look and will look completely different for another autistic child. Please don't compare. It is what it is for your child and your family. Yeah, I just want to acknowledge it can be really hard. These steps that I'm going to teach you, these 3 steps, it's in hopes that they become easier, that they make these things easier for your child and for your family. So your brain does need time to process, especially your autistic child. Their brain needs time to process when an activity is ending or part of their day is ending, a new one or a new part of their day is beginning, and then navigating that space in between, that space being the actual transition. So just keeping that in mind, what looks like a simple transition from your perspective might actually be asking so much of your child. So it's about putting yourself in their shoes in that situation. So something that I used to do is I used to think of being rushed. I was always so rushed getting out of the house. How can I make this faster? How can I stop the screaming? How can I make my child listen? And those expectations were actually what was killing me. I had to remove those. I had to think of it as the transition that my child was experiencing was not safe for them. So I had to look at it as how can I make this feel safer for my child's nervous system? And being my child's co regulator, they look at me. And if I'm not regulated in my own nervous system, then how am I supposed to regulate them? So if I'm expecting them to follow instructions, to listen and be patient when I need them to, I need to be modeling that to them. So we're really challenging this power struggle here, this very traditional approach of I'm the parent, you listen to me. It's, well, of course, you need boundaries. You need to have your values in place as a family. You want your child to listen and respect. There's this huge aspect that they are learning from you. So much of what parents model and parents say to their child, that is what teaches their child. Their actions teach their child. It's not necessarily the content of what they're saying, if that makes sense. So if a parent is yelling all the time at their child, that is how the child learns to operate in the world. Whereas if a child is spoken to with care and with being listened to and actually giving them the respect and the autonomy to respond, then that is how they will end up showing up in the world for other people as well. Okay, so I do invite you to pause. So think about a challenging transition, just one. I'm sure there are many, but just think of one. Instead of trying to fix your child's response, ask, what does this feel like from my child's perspective? What demands am I not seeing? Okay, great. Welcome back. Again, would love to know, throw into the comments anything that came up for you. And just know that the shift doesn't happen overnight. So I spent years managing these behaviors instead of understanding the transitional experience for my child. Okay, so let's jump into number 2. And that is what I call safety bridges. So I like things that I can attempt to visualize because that is a struggle for me in my brain. But I'm hoping that can illustrate almost as a metaphor to you guys. Or so we create safety bridges. So this essentially is a bridge that helps your child move from point A to point B while maintaining their emotional and sensory safety. What it is not, so just to be really crystal clear, this is not about controlling a transition. It's not about forcing any sort of compliance. It will look different in different environments or different situations. Even the exact same transition one day will look different the next day. So please expect that. Don't think there's only a one size fits all approach or solution for this. So what these safety bridges are is they support your child's nervous system through the transition. They give them autonomy, they respect the child, and they allow your child to feel safe. They reduce overwhelm, they reduce anxiety, and they actually honor the unique way that a neurodiverse brain works or an autistic brain works. And these bridges can be individualized for your child. So I'm just going to give you some real life examples to see if something resonates with you. and your family. So you can look at a bridge as processing time. So instead of just saying to your child, hey, we're leaving in 5 minutes, you could instead practice saying, after you finish that puzzle, we're going to get our shoes on. And that might actually be where you stop and see how they go with that. You may also know that they're able to follow a few instructions at a time. And then you could say, hey, after you finish that puzzle, why don't we go get our shoes on so we can walk to the car together? So you're kind of pre-planning and prepping what it is that they're going to do. This is an example that could work for one child and not another. So this may not work for your child. So please don't take this example as the only thing that will work. I've seen it work for many children. It's just that prepping and giving them that stability and predictability that they need to know what is coming next. So you're saying, after you finish that puzzle, let's go grab our shoes. You may want to, based on how your child communicates, their communication needs, visuals and visual supports are really effective. Not in all autistic children, so I will say that. If your child is PDA autistic, visuals can actually be a demand in themselves. So that will most likely not work for them. But if your child does respond well to visual cues, or even if they are PDA, you may be able to find a different way that they will enjoy visuals and respond to visuals. Pro tip there, novelty. So I will just jump in and say that visuals can work for some PDA children if they are led fully by the child. And by fully, I mean, here are your visuals. Obviously, they have to kind of work with what's going on in the day, but you give them choice of how they work through their transition. So here's a photo of the puzzle being put away. Here's a photo of their shoes. Here's a photo of the car. And then once they make sense of that within themselves, then they can follow through with it a bit easier. Again, there's no perfect answer here, but that's an example of something that I have seen work many times. Another thing you might do besides the visuals, besides the verbal bridge that you're giving them, is you may ask if they want to put a timer on. And that visual cue, whether it's a sand timer or like a dial timer or even a phone timer, it can help them see that there's a beginning and an end point, and then they know that once that timer goes off, they can transition to what's next, gives them that preparation. Sometimes timers don't work or they stop working and they can actually be a cause for anxiety. So just keep that in mind as well, that waiting for the timer can be a lot. Another thing that you can do with these bridges is sensory bridges. So if they really like deep pressure, a weighted blanket could be really helpful, or something that's weighted. There's like weighted stuffed toys that can help them transition from point A to point B. Headphones, if they need some noise cancelling headphones to wear from, say, the house to the car or from a car to a loud space. If you prepare them for that, again, you can use a visual to offer choice if they need it, then that can be really helpful. And a predictability bridge. So this is what we had talked about with the visual schedules, the advance notice. It kind of all comes together, but that element of predictability in their routines does not work all the time, I know, but if there is consistency in your routines and if there's advanced preparation, then it just gives your child that safety of knowing what's next. And I do just want to jump in and say that I've heard of some families trying to stretch their child's predictability and routines or need for routines. And I would like to say, obviously, your child, please do what you need to do. I'm not the expert on your child, you are. That can be really anxiety provoking. And I would just invite you to really think of how that could feel for them. Well, actually, what could be happening is they could be increasing their masking and then they could be overwhelmed, and that accumulation throughout the day can set them off even more. So just keep that in mind as you're responding to your child. Like I said, safety bridges, they are unique to each child. So you will need to find their safety bridge, what that looks like for them. And you might need to tweak a little bit and also know that what works one day in one situation may not work the next day. So as I'm sure you're knowing, depending on how long you've been working through autism strategies to support your child and your family, there is a lot of trial and error. There is a lot of coming together with whether it's a partner or your support system, grandparents, teachers, occupational therapists, speech therapists, anyone that is in the space to support your child, anyone that's in their corner. There's a lot of back and forth, and that doesn't mean that things aren't working or that there's not progress. It means that you are all attuned to the child and that you are supporting them through responsive reflecting and then implementing new strategies. So that's very okay. It doesn't mean anyone's failing. Okay, and step 3, always follow the child's lead. Yes, so much easier said than done. There is a balance that normally needs to take place of honoring the child's needs and then also maintaining the rhythms of the family structure. And that balance, again, will look different for everyone, and it might look different day to day. And I know this might not be talked about as openly, but it is a struggle. And something that we had to do as a family is that we had to really make some big adjustments because I found that I was just rushed all the time. I did not have time. My work was too much. I was traveling too much, and I therefore could not show up patiently to support my child. All the transitions that he was struggling with, I was actually making it worse because I was showing up dysregulated, very rushed, and I needed to rebalance what was important to our family and our lives. So not everyone needs to do that to that extent, but I really had to. I really had to cut back on work, my travel time, take my child out of after school care, and just reset our value of having an unrushed family. I will say that is not perfect. That is not all the time, but it is something that we are so aware of, and it is a value for all of us. And since we are aware of it, we can respond. And there's been so much more success in our son's transitions and well being for our family. So, just to recap, there's the traditional way and the new way, or the connection first way. Traditional is always be consistent, stick to schedules, maintain parental authority, and then there is responsiveness and connection based and relationship building. So, paying attention to your child's capacity, adjusting your expectations, really listening to your child and collaborating with your child. So, having that negotiation, that back and forth with them, whether it's said or unsaid, it doesn't need to be a verbal exchange or a speaking exchange. It is really just reading their communication cues because your autistic child may be non speaking, they may have limited speech, or they may be a fluent speaker. They could also be a fluent speaker and need a lot of visual supports. Again, this is a spectrum, and communication needs for autistic children are all different. And just being aware of that will increase your responsiveness to them. So, following their lead, really noticing how their capacity may change in each moment, whether it's the beginning of the day and they have more capacity. If you start to notice that they're really struggling with the demands or expectations placed on them, then their capacity might really be lowering. So their autonomy cup, as I call it, may be really depleted, and you may need to fill it up with as much autonomy moments as possible. I'm going to get into that in a future podcast. So please stay tuned and comment below if that's something that you do want to hear about, this aspect of supporting their autonomy. Really relevant to PDA as well. So some days your child might wake up really well rested, really regulated, ready to go, and not as much might phase them. And other days they may just really be in a struggling nervous system state. And that's where your responsiveness and your attunement will really help. It's really important when you respect your child's needs through transitions that you communicate with them every step of the way, you negotiate where needed, you are flexible as a parent and understand, obviously, when there might be times where you just have to get going, and that will be hard on your child. So you may want to prepare them for that if it's something that you can't get out of or something that is going to happen inevitably. And then once they're in a regulated state, perhaps you unpack that with them in a way that they can understand. Okay, final pause moment of this episode. Have a think. When your child feels that their needs are seen and respected, how do they respond? Hopefully you've hit pause and you had a think, you had a little journal, and you came back. Would love to know in the comments, what did you come up with? No right or wrong. This might even be the first time that you've thought about this, or maybe you think about it all the time, but what did you come up with? Can you take what you come up with and make an actionable goal for your next transition with your child? For example, if you came up with, my child feels heard and is less anxious when their needs are seen and respected, then can you take that knowledge into your next transition by really hearing your child, taking your time, getting down at their level, and just notice and observe what happens? I do just want to say that with transitions, it's not about having no structure, it's about being responsive to your child and to your family. So everyone has needs, of course. Your autistic child will have very different needs than the other members of your family. It doesn't mean that they're more important than the other members of your family, which is a whole other thing that I think families struggle with, or I see that families struggle with. But you just need different approaches, and understanding that your child, your autistic child, is for most of their day navigating a world that was not meant for or created for autistic children or autistic adults. By that, I mean a fast paced world, a world where social norms are in fact considered norms that everyone should know, even though that's not necessary, in my opinion. It can just be really hard for them to show up and to navigate transitions and to feel safe and to have safe nervous system responses. And this is one of the huge reasons why anxiety is so prevalent in autistic children or autistic people. Okay, so I just want to do a quick wrap up here. Please know these 3 steps, they're not quick fixes. So anything that I talk about, for the most part, unless I say this is a super quick fix, it won't be. It is about building over time relationships. And I'm sure you all know, or you can relate, that relationships don't just happen overnight. They do build over time. So this is about creating lasting change over temporary compliance. So that's not what we're about here. So, just a reality check. This might feel like slow progress at first, and it will take time to understand. Creativity as you come up with different bridges and what works for your child. Figure out how to bring them into the process of creating these bridges that work for them. And of course, your patience to follow their lead is really important. When you do invest in understanding and connection first strategies, everything does eventually become easier. The communication, the cooperation, the genuine trust, everything just starts to fall into place. And the biggest battle is actually that mindset shift, depending where you're at in your understanding of parenting and how you parent in your philosophy. If you are holding on to a behavioral way of being a parent, of a power struggle, of thinking that in order for my child to understand how to respect people, they must listen to my demands and commands of them, until you figure out that that might not be the best way, then things will be halted. For a transformation to occur, you will need to increase your understanding of connection first approaches and build up that genuine trust. And it will take time. It'll take time for you to switch your mindset and your thinking, but I promise you it is worth it once you do. Okay, so practical next step. One transition this week that you can consistently keep in front of mind and work on. Apply these steps that make sense to you that we've spoke of. Maybe there's some that we haven't. If there are, comment below. Would love to see what works for you. And make it easy for yourself. Don't pick 5 different things. Honestly, just choose one transition. If it's bedtimes, if it's breakfast, if it's getting from putting on shoes to buckling them up in a car seat, focus on that, observe, and notice what happens when you implement these approaches. So you are not just managing transitions, you are building trust, which really is, like we were saying about the relationships, trust is the foundation for everything. Trust, safety, relationships, connection, that's what we're wired to need and to respond to. Thank you so much for listening to this episode on transitions. Next week, we'll be jumping into advocacy. And these are 4 simple steps that we'll be looking at that actually start with your inner circle. So, tip does not begin in a school meeting. This begins in your home, at the dinner table, and with those who you spend a lot of time with. If this resonated with you, if you are enjoying the connection and the relationship approach and thinking, can this work for me and my family? I would love if you could join us in the Connection First community. So have a look, head on over to chantalhewitt.com/community. Would love to see you inside.
Thank you so much for allowing me into your world today. Wherever you are around the globe, if you like what you've heard, I would be so grateful if you would click that subscribe button and comment below to tell me one thing. What support do you need? This helps me create episodes that truly impact our shared community. By commenting, you not only help yourself, but you help make modern, neurodiversity-affirming autism support accessible to those who are searching for a better parenting approach that actually feels good. I'm Chantel, and I'll see you next week.